Yes, and we are live. I'm here with my new friend, Rabbi. How are you doing?
We're good. Call me Elijah,
Rabbi
and
Elijah. Do I need to call you Rabbi or just
just call me
Elijah?
Elijah. It's fine.
Very
Yeah.
nice to meet you. You're my second rabbi, and
Okay.
I interviewed Rabbi Kremezi, who's here in Montreal, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Some of the points that you found interesting in his interview, because you contacted me, which is unusual. Usually, I'm trying to chase people down. But before we get into that, would you please talk about yourself, your upbringing, your childhood? Where was it? What was your first introduction to God, religion? Did you ever change religions? Did you ever fall away from faith in God? Talk about all the ups and downs, if there were any, and all the way up until today, please.
That's interesting. um, so I was born into an observant. I like to use the word observant. I don't like the word religious family. But so I was educated in, as you would say, the faith, I suppose. But I certainly had to find my own way because there was a lot that didn't sit well with me. But I think it was more personality wise. My dad is a rabbi, and there is a saying. I don't have the actual saying in Israel, but there's a saying that there's the curse of the son of the rabbi. I mean, you're never up to par. You're never good enough, and you're not doing the right thing, and you didn't study enough, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a big challenge, and I know I have many friends who have gone through that. Some of them have gone off the way. Some are hanging on because they still want. We don't want to lose it, but at the same time, there's a bit of detachment from that. And so yeah. So just a quick history. I was born in Scotland, but my dad was a slaughterer there. So a ritual slaughterer. So like he would,
Okay.
slaughter
Which
animals
city were
for
you in, or which town
kosher
or city?
consumption. Sorry?
Which town or city were you in? Because I lived in Edinburgh for a
Glasgow.
bit. Glasgow, okay.
Right.
My friend asked me to ask you, have you tried the deep fried Mars bar?
Is that a thing
It's a
in
thing.
Scotland?
It's a thing. Yeah, I've had it. I've had it.
I've seen some references to that. Like there was a Seinfeld
It's
where the
real.
British people did that.
It's real. It's disgusting. It's
I
not good.
haven't actually tried that. No,
It's not good. No, it's not good.
I can't imagine that's healthy.
No, it's too much. It's too
No,
much.
it's too much. Yeah, it's too much. And
Yeah.
Mars bar as it is, and be satisfied with that. There's a story of a Hasidic rabbi who was just so much into. He was, I don't know, he was in a rapture, I guess you might say, and they had to bring him back down to earth with a bagel and butter. That's what they say. They made him eat it, and they brought him back
Oh,
down to earth. So it's like the materialism
it's so good. That's
was a way
good. That's
to
very good. The bagel,
reground.
here in Montreal, our bagels are famous, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, anyways, so yeah, so my dad was doing that, and then when my brother and myself uh, we got older, we had to go to school, and there was not much there. So my family moved to London, and then the economy. This was the late 70s. Was a little difficult, challenging, and so my family, my father's side my father had some brothers in Venezuela, so they were able to help him get a job there. So we moved there. Now, from England
Oh,
to Venezuela is
wow.
quite a cultural shock
Ah.
for us. And so we were sent off to the States, my brother and I, to different schools. And so that was our challenge. That was a challenge there, but there was also a lot of positive. Um, but I think for myself, I rediscovered my Judaism, I would say, because I kind of little bit veered off the path. I was a teenager and trying to figure things out. But I went back to school. I would say school. Yeshiva is what we call it. It's a religious school where the main focus is the study of Torah, Judaism texts, Talmud, the laws and prayer, etc. And that was for me one of the best decisions I ever made. And so, because I'm not your typical Scholar, I would say. I mean, I don't. I'm more of I'm a creative person. I'm more of a visual person, and so for me, it was always difficult. It was always a challenge to study in the traditional way. But I've always loved the ideas, and so I've come up with some of my own ideas. But whatever. I started writing a book, which is dragging on. But so that's where I stand.
What was
So yeah.
the denomination of Judaism you were raised with, and where did you land later in life?
So well, so if you want to call it denomination, I mean, it's the movement where I felt very closely attuned to was the Hasidic movement,
Yeah, yeah.
which was a revolution in the Jewish world in the late 1700s, where the focus was less on scholarship, and you were measured based on your level of scholarship versus the Hasidic movement, which came along and said God appreciates everybody equally and no one is better than anyone else, and you could have a simple person who may not have been as scholarly raised, and their prayer to God is as equal or maybe even more dear to God than the great scholar who knows all, who has all the knowledge.
Well, it's about joy,
uh,
isn't it? Isn't it about joy for the Hasidim?
there was an emphasis on joy, an emphasis on prayer, which was less emphasized in the it's called the Lita approach, which was more the conventional orthodoxy of the time. And when the Hasidic movement came, of course, there was a lot of opposition to it. There was fears that it was a deviant movement. It was it kind of it didn't it 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 didn't ridicule, but it de-emphasized, I would say, the scholarship part of it, even though there were many great scholars who were drawn to it because they also sought to find a personal connection to God, which was certainly not emphasized in the other movement, in the conventional stream. So in any case, so I was drawn to that. There's the Chabad sect within
Ah, yeah,
the
yeah.
Hasidic movement, which is actually a more intellectual focus. So there's an intellectual focus on the understanding of God and his place and how we fit into the world and everything and how we connect with him. But also the thing that I appreciated most was the idea that rather than how much study uh, you're able to accomplish is, do you care about your fellow? The focus is caring for the fellow. The famous story of the founder of the Chabad movement, who was an incredible scholar himself. The story goes about him that when he was 13 years old, he was already completely knowledgeable in the entire Talmud, the books of the Rambam, the Maimonides, and the rest of the Torah. And he had a decision to make. Where was he going to go from there? And he could go to Vilna, which was where the center of Jewish study was focused, or he could go to the Baal Shem Tov, where the focus was prayer. And he reasoned to himself, he says, well, I already know how to learn, but I haven't really learned how to pray. So I want to learn how to pray. So he went there, he took that path, and he became I would say the star pupil of the successor to the Baal Shem Tov, was the Maggid, and he had many students who were all great in their own right, but Rabbi Shneur Zalman, so he chose that path to so he could learn how to pray. And so the focus is on personal connection to God as well as scholarship. It's not discarding the scholarship, but it's maintaining that. And so the story goes that his son who's a brilliant scholar himself, was a young man, he had a child. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman basically was his grandson, was crying in the crib, and they were in the same home, in a different apartment, a different floor, and the baby was crying, and Rabbi Shneur Zalman heard the baby crying, came downstairs and saw that his son was so immersed in his study that he didn't hear the child crying. and he went to pick up the baby to calm the baby down. Then he told his son, he says, if your study is at a price where you cannot hear the cry of another person, there's something defective in it. You have to be able to hear the cry of the other person. You can't it can't be at such a price where you don't hear the humanity around you. So that really appealed to me. It appeals to many people, so that's been where I where I feel comfortable, and that's been my approach. Of course, I'm still in touch with my parents, and they live in Jerusalem. They're very concerned right now with what's going on, but that's basically in a nutshell.
I worked with some Jews who followed is it called Lubavitch or something like that?
Lubavitch is the city where the main focus
Okay.
it took place, but so
So anyway, this guy, I guess this guy was well, he was Jewish. I don't know exactly if he was. He didn't look Hasidic. He didn't do the things.
Right.
But he had a lot of books, and many of his books were by an author, the same author whose name is Kaplan. Do you know Kaplan?
So there is a Kaplan. There's a Rabbi Elie Kaplan. I mean, he was a brilliant scholar, died very young, like 36 or something, and he wrote, I don't know how many
of books.
Passed away in the early 80s.
Okay. Is he connected with the Schneerson?
So, no, he wasn't Chabad, but he was very in tune with the Hasidic movement. He wrote some books on Kabbalah as well, which is
mystical.
That's the other thing, is that the traditional stream of Judaism kind of didn't reject Kabbalah, but was very wary of going there, whereas the Hasidic movement embraced the mystical side of Judaism.
Yeah.
The inner meaning.
You're open to that too?
Yes. I mean, it's so I would say that if I were to explain it the way I understand it, I would say that there is the what to do. Like, what do we have? Like, Judaism is full of laws, many laws governing our life. And there's the what to do, but what about the why? What do we accomplish when we do something? So, or what do we accomplish when we maintain kosher and don't eat non-kosher, right? And so the mystical traditions kind of give us an understanding where, if I eat kosher food and I make the blessing before it, and then my intentions are to serve God with that energy, I'm elevating the sparks of that food. Even the animal that was slaughtered to create that meat is now elevated to a higher sphere. That's not really taught much in the other stream, but it's very attractive because it gives you a deeper meaning, a deeper understanding of what we do.
Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with the at least the legend and the myth surrounding the noble savages, the Amerindian, the Native peoples, First Nations, and the relationship with nature and the food that they gathered and ate, and the respect that they showed, the prayers that they did to the Creator, the Great Spirit, and how they showed respect and reverence, and they had the ultimate ecology. I mean, I'm looking at it through rose-colored glasses now, just showing the sort of the caricature of it. Part of me wants to believe that myth. The conservative friends that I have say, well, that's just garbage. They were savages killing each other. But maybe the truth lies somewhere in between the two. But the idea of respecting your food, respecting Mother Nature, and our Catholic Pope, he's talking a lot about respecting nature, being a steward of the earth. God created the earth and he told us to steward the earth. A lot of the conservative Catholics, they critique him and say, well, environmentalism is garbage. We don't need to take care of the planet or whatever. But I think we need to be cautious, but also use common sense. Like we have to respect the planet. We have to respect the animals that we eat, but we can't worship our house cat or put pets above humans or trees above humans. I worked for environmental companies when I was younger, and they literally wanted to save the planet by killing humans and letting the trees and the.
So that's an extreme position to hold. I agree. There has to be a balance where, certainly, the Torah is replete with many environmental laws, For example, the concept of a green belt. I don't know if you're familiar with the green belt around a city, where you have housing built. You develop, you build housing. So there is a concept of having an area around the city that is green,
Okay.
to allow nature to be preserved. There is a rule that if there's a Jewish army that goes, and we're talking biblical times, and conquers a city, they may not chop down any fruit-bearing trees. There's the soldiers, one of their kit had to be a shovel, so that when they had to do their needs, they would cover it up and not defile the earth. So there's many of these rules that are actually in the Bible, that are very in tune to nature. But at the same time, what we see is that today there is the environmental movement has gone to an extreme where humanity has to be subservient to nature. And the truth is, that's not really what's going on. What's really going on is it's a means of making us allow ourselves to be controlled and not allow us. God said initially when Noah went out of the ark, be fruitful and multiply and conquer the earth, but at the same time respect it at the same time. But man is clearly the superior being over the animals. At the same time, the Bible teaches that man has to, as that powerful being, has to also consider that he is, like you say, a steward of the earth, and one of the laws that apply to all humanity, not just to Jews, is we have to be very sensitive to not be cruel to animals. One of the laws that Judaism teaches to a farmer, and it's not just a nice idea, this is actually the law. A farmer is not allowed to sit down to his breakfast until he makes sure all his animals are fed first. That is actually a law in the Code of Jewish Law. There's the prohibition of doing work on the Sabbath. At the same time, if you have cows that depend on the farmer to milk them, if they're not milked, they're going to be in pain. The farmer, then that law is over superseded, I would say is the word. And the cows must be milked so that they're not caused any pain. We do slaughter animals, we will eat them, but the slaughtering process, at least in Judaism, has to be as painless as possible. So, like I mentioned to you earlier, my father, he's still alive. He doesn't practice anymore. He's retired, but he was a slaughterer. One of the focuses of ritual Jewish slaughter is that the knife has to be incredibly razor sharp, so that as soon as the cut on the neck is made, the animal loses consciousness, doesn't feel the pain. I once went with him to a slaughtering. It was quite an experience. I couldn't eat meat for 3 months after. I was completely traumatized, but I got over it. But yeah, this was in South America, actually. I went with him. So at the same time, we're allowed to consume the animal. At the same time, we have to be very considerate to their feelings and to their pain. So.
Yeah. Did you have some particular points that you wanted to address? Because otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do rapid fire questions off the top of my head. But if you had some things you wanted to talk about from Rabbi Kremezi, for example, now would be the time to address those.
It's been a while since I heard that podcast. I guess I should have reviewed it again. But there was one point that was mentioned. I don't know if it's so important, but I also wanted to share some ideas. But was the point that was made that man can reach a level of perfection, and it just struck me because we do have a verse in Ecclesiastes, I think it's chapter 7, that there is no righteous man who has not sinned on the earth. So there's no person who is perfect, and we know very well that Moses hit the rock as great as he was, and as humble as he was, and as righteous as he was, and as close as he was to God, he made mistakes. And it's to teach us that no one can be perfect, but at the same time, we can strive to reach a godly place. The Hebrew word for man is Adam, and the word for to be like is Adameh, to be like God. So we are encouraged to be like God. So there is a famous book. It's a book of morals, I guess you could say, and it's called the Tomer Devorah, which lists the qualities that God has. For example, he's patient, slow to anger, he's forgiving, he's loving, and it shows how this is how God is. Now, how can we be like God in that way, to be patient and to be slow to anger and to be loving and to be forgiving, etc. So those are there's the 13 attributes, which I can't list them out right now, but that's the idea. So, but the idea that man can be perfect is not. So that was the thing that stood out for me. There were maybe some other ideas, but if you want to go with that, we can.
No. Well, I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you. But did Rabbi Kremezi suggest that we could be perfect here below?
I would have to go back and listen to where I heard that, but I think if
I don't think I said that. I don't think I said that, right?
No,
because I don't believe
know
that.
I came across, and maybe it's my misunderstanding or misimpression, but I think it was an interesting conversation.
What kind of a Jew is he? Is he conservative? Is he a conservative Jew, Orthodox Jew?
No. I would say he's Orthodox, and I thought overall he was excellent. And
you agreed?
I've heard of him. I haven't actually met him. I don't know him personally, and it's nothing to say in any way negative towards anybody.
Right,
and
right.
I just wanted to bring that point forward.
You also mentioned in an email that you wanted to talk about the non-Jew, and how the non-Jews are saved. I think it's called the law of Noah, or the commandments of Noah, or something like that.
Right, and I think it's very relevant.
Are there seven?
Right.
Points.
So the tradition is, and this is very interesting, because the Torah is the Bible, which what you would call the Bible, is really a code book that needs to be deciphered and understood. It can't be understood literally or superficially just by reading the text. It needs the interpretation. There's many areas in the Torah that hint to that idea. For example, and we were mentioning ritual slaughter earlier. For example, the Torah says, and you will slaughter the animal according to the way I have showed you, but there is nowhere in the Bible where that has been explained. And so from there we understand that when Moses came down with the Torah, he also brought with it an oral tradition that goes along with it. And so in Judaism, and there's another hint to that as well. And I would love to quote you chapter and verse. I cannot right now. I do have the Bible with me, but I'm not going to start leafing through it. It says, and you will fulfill the words of these Torahs in plural. And it says that in the actual text, these Torahs. And so the interpretation is there's the written Torah that we have in writing, which is the scroll, the 5 books of Moses, plus the prophets. But then there's also the narrative that goes with them. And basically, the Talmud is basically an amalgamation of a lot of that oral tradition, which was beginning to become forgotten. And then the rabbis at the time of the temple, they decided that they have to put it down in writing, and that's what makes up the books of the Talmud. So that is the fundamental basis of the oral Torah. It's quite voluminous and quite a lot there to go through. Not many people have gone through the entire thing. It's quite vast. But so the 7 laws. So I'll go back to the 7 laws as we started this. So the 7 laws of Noah are not clearly defined in the Torah, but they can be understood and derived. And I'll give you an example of that. Firstly, when God created the heaven and earth and then put Adam and Eve in the as we understand it, because it's very difficult to understand, what is this paradise, the Garden of Eden? What was that place? There were laws already given. We know that God said to Adam and Eve, say, you may enjoy everything here, but there's one tree that you may not touch. This is forbidden. And that was sort of the fundamental basis to say, life is there to be enjoyed, but there are some things that are not allowed. We may not enjoy. That we have to restrain ourselves a little bit. It's not everything is out there for us to take for ourselves. Somebody else may have a wife. I can't just go and take that woman. It's forbidden. Like, there's certain things that are off limits. And so actually the 7 laws of Noah were actually given, they were given to Adam, but there were 6 laws given to Adam. There was a 7th added when Noah came out of the ark. And I'll give you an example of how it's hinted but not clearly defined. But there are some websites which give the basis for all these laws. We know that Adam and Eve had 2 sons, Cain and Abel. And then something happened. Cain got jealous with Abel, and he smote him, and and Abel died. And then God came to Cain and said, what have you done to your brother? Why have you murdered him? And so there is a clear understanding that murder was prohibited. These were laws that were given to Adam and Eve and understood at the time, but they're not clearly given, as opposed to like the 10 Commandments, which were clearly given in the Torah. So I'll tell you what the 7 laws are, and I'll give you a website which you can look at later, and your listeners can look at later, that show the laws and show also the source for those laws as well. So the ultimate law is the acceptance, that we accept that there is a one creator of heaven and earth. There is also a negative side to that. There's a positive side to it, and there's a negative side to it. The negative side is do not curse or do not blaspheme the name of God. How we understand that, I'm not quite sure. I cringe when someone says, Goddamn, because I'm not sure what that means. It might be violating that, but basically to accept that there is a one creator and not to curse his name. Then the other laws are very logical, very simple to understand. We shall not murder, and this applies to everyone, Jew and non-Jew alike. It's all equal. Do not commit murder. Do not steal. Now, stealing is very interesting because in the 10 Commandments, where it says thou shalt not steal, it's actually referring to kidnapping. It's referring to the theft of humans. Yes. Either for slavery or for hostage, and that's very relevant right now. We see now what's going on in the Middle East, where they kidnap people. Theft in the 10 Commandments actually relates to kidnapping. It may also be that when we say theft in the 7 laws, that it also includes kidnapping. I would assume that it definitely does, but it also includes private property. Just as I work hard and I acquire something, I don't want someone else to just take it, and that causes chaos in the world. We want a society that's civil and respectful, each one to each other. And then there's also morality in that there is marriage between man and woman, and we continue the family, continue the species through that, and there is a respect within that framework.
That's number 3.
That would be number 3. If I'm going in order, I'm not sure if I'm going in order, but yes, I believe so. Right, it's definitely in there. It's definitely one of them. The sexual morality. It also includes a prohibition against homosexuality, which violates the natural code as God has given it. I know it's not popular to say it today, but we're not here to sugarcoat things. We're here to say the truth. Otherwise, we might as well not waste our time. That is one of the laws. The other one. Okay, so we've done 5 so far.
Well, you did God and murder, sexual stuff.
There's God, and then there's the blaspheming, which is.
Well, there's a second one.
It's the second one, yes.
Oh.
So then there's not to murder, not to steal, and to have morality within marriage.
I see. Okay.
Now, if any of that especially the last three, breaks down. Or let's say someone comes and claims, "Oh, you took something from me," and the other one says, "No, I didn't." Now we could go to blows. So
we
the
need a
sixth
system of
law,
justice. We need a
a
system of
system of
justice.
justice, a court system where people can resolve their disputes in a court of law.
Yeah.
These are very logical ideas, and everyone who's civil will say, yeah, that makes sense. Why not? We should do that. And then the seventh law was only given later after Noah emerged from the ark, and that is to the permission to consume animals, but at the same time to not cause them any pain and suffering. One of the things that that was done, a practice that was done in the ancient times, was they didn't have refrigeration. So if I had a cow and I wanted a steak, but I didn't want to kill the whole cow, well, I would hack a piece of meat off the cow. And the poor animal is suffering, but then I can get my steak. And this actually was a practice, and this is prohibited in the seven laws of Noah. I know it sounds gruesome, but you know what? It's even being practiced today in a terrible. And it's really sad.
Where?
Well,
third world.
So there's a practice in the Far East where, I don't know if you've seen this. I've seen it, and it's horrendous. I don't know why they do this, where they'll take a fish. Now, it may be that fish, because they're cold-blooded, they may not suffer pain the same way a warm-blooded animal would, but I still think this is under that prohibition. They'll take a fish and wrap the head in a wet towel, and then they'll fry it. They'll cook it while it's still alive, and then they'll bring it to the customer in the restaurant. So you see the fish is still trying to gasp for breath, and they'll start eating it. This is prohibited in the seven laws of Noah. If you're going to eat an animal, kill it first. And once it's dead, then you can do what you need to do and you can consume it. This is like, how much do we need for our own enjoyment to cause another creature to suffer? It's absolutely outrageous. And this should be taught. That's one of the reasons I bring this up, because people don't think much about it, but it's so important to be caring about the sensitivity of others. So those are the seven laws. There's a website. It's probably not the most current, but there's a number of them that all cover the same subject. There's one that I've seen. It's called asknoah.org.
Oh yeah.
Asknoah.org, and it covers the seven laws very basically in a way to understand.
I got Noah right here. Can you see on your screen?
There you go. There you go.
With his
he has a model of the ark.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. We just read about Noah. You know, we follow a schedule throughout the year with 52 weeks in a year, and the 5 books of Moses are subdivided into approximately 50 sections. So this past Shabbat, which is Sabbath, we read in the synagogue the story of Noah, the whole section of Noah there. Nice. So that was fascinating.
How do you pronounce his name in Hebrew?
Noach.
Noach.
Noach. Yeah.
That sounds like the Scottish way to say it too. Noach.
Well, yeah. So we have the 8th letter of the alphabet is the chet, which is like some people write it ch. So the Chabad movement is spelled Chabad. It's an acronym for the Chachma Bina Da'at, which is the three attributes of intellectual attributes. So there's the intellectual there's the spark of an idea, that's Chachma.
Intuition.
Intuition, yes. When you come up with an idea and it's just a flash in your mind, but it's there. But if I ask you to explain it, you'll say, well, give me a moment, I have to think and bring it out into words. So that's Bina. That's where I'm taking that intellectual idea, that intuition, I'm expressing it in words so that I can now share it with you. And then Da'at is where it's become part of your knowledge, where the next time I ask you, you don't even have to think about it. You can express the idea fully. It's already part of your memory. It's part of your it's part of you. It's become, so that's like the development of ideas. So that's Chabad. That's what it stands for. But anyways, the first letter is the Chet, which is the 8th letter of the alphabet. And Noach is spelled with a Nun and a Chet, and it's pronounced Noach.
Can you talk to me? Do you mind talking to me a little bit about Moses in the burning bush. Just give me some insights. What do you like about that scene where there's the bush that's not being consumed by the fire? Do you like that? Do you like that scene?
The bush that's not being consumed is the Jewish people.
Okay.
The Jewish people is unfortunately where we've been on fire, and there have been many who would like to see us gone, and so we're on fire, but we're not consumed, because God has guaranteed that the Jewish people will be eternal. And you see that in history. That's not just a nice word. It's not just a nice idea. I mean, you see that, and it's till today. It's when I see the amount of irrational hatred, it actually strengthens my faith. It's sad because it's painful that people dying, and I don't want to see anybody dying on either side of the equation. I don't want to see any innocent people dying. But the amount of irrational hatred for the Jewish people is reflective of that idea of that idea where, well, I mean, God decided. I had no say in the matter. God decided. He chose Abraham and his children to be the carriers of his message to the world, and of course the Bible is probably the most popular book out there, even though many people would like to say it's irrelevant, it's fairy tales, it's just nonsense, but it still remains to this day the number one most respected book on the world, and everyone's trying to understand it. And when God gave the laws, he said to the Jewish people, if you follow these laws, I will be with you. You will suffer, but at the same time, you will carry my message to the world. I hope that I can be a good steward to that message, and to live. It's not just a message said in words, but also to live by those standards, which are not easy. The seventh day of the week, I don't use the computer. I don't drive anywhere. It's a day of rest, a day of being with family. And the interesting thing about the chosen concept, which some people may have an issue with, I always say this to my friends: there are Jews who choose to opt out. There are Jews who do not live by those laws, who do not respect the Sabbath, and most of the time it's out of ignorance. Some of them, maybe they don't want to keep the laws. They want to be free, and that's okay, and that's their choice. And there's nobody out there to punish anybody. There's nobody out there to warn or to say anything. They're free to choose as they will, but they're choosing to opt out. At the same time, there are many who are not Jewish who say, I want to be part of the Jewish nation. I want to live by these laws. I'm okay with it. I'm okay if I'm going to be hated. I'm okay if it's very difficult to keep these laws, to eat kosher, to keep the Sabbath. I want to do that. So those people are choosing to come under the covenant, and that's their choice. So the chosen idea, it's not a privilege, and it's not anything to boast about, or to if anything, it should bring great humility and constant and as a Catholic, you would know this, constant guilt. Like, am I good enough? Am I doing what I should be doing, etc. And so that's the way I see it. Now, that's just maybe my way of seeing it.
I've got a comment from the comment section here, the live chat. My friend Nugloff's here. I want to give a shout out to him. But he said what I was thinking, which is that he understands the chosen people concept as chosen to be the priesthood of God, the priestly people to the Gentiles, to the nations.
Right.
That's what I understand as a Christian, and I think that's how I read the Torah too.
Yeah. So the Torah says, "Va'atem tihiu li mamlechet kohanim v'go kadosh." You shall be for me a nation of priests and a holy nation. By the way, the word goy is a nation, and it's not. And some people say, "Oh, that's a derogatory." It's not a derogatory term at all. It just means nation in Hebrew. So in any case, yeah, if you are a nation of priests, then who are you ministering to?
Yeah.
Because we have our own priests, right? We have the children of Aaron. So when when the times when the temple was, or even today, that we still fulfill the obligation of the redemption of the firstborn. So in my case, my older son was born cesarean, so that didn't apply because he's the one who opens the womb. But if he would have been born naturally, then at the 30 days after he's born, there is a ritual that takes place, which is called Pidyon Haben, which is the redemption of the son. We do a symbolic gesture. We find someone who is of the priestly tribe, and then we have to give him 5 coins of silver, and that's the ritual. And there's a blessing made, and that's fulfilling the biblical obligation of redemption of the firstborn. But so those are the priests within Judaism. But as a nation, as a representative of God, we are all supposed to be priests by sharing the words, spreading the news, spreading the ideas, and that's possibly part of what we're doing today. If I share with you the ideas of the 7 laws of Noah, which we are all children of Noah, all of us, Jew, Gentile, because those were the only ones who survived, right, after the great flood. So when I share that with you, so that's also your way of coming under the covenant of Noah with God, and it's your way to connect to God. You don't have to convert to Judaism. You don't have to keep all the 613 laws, which are quite vast and very difficult and complex, and it's very consuming. It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. I know a fellow from south of the United States. He belongs to a Noahide group. They have a couple of them on Facebook. There's a couple of Noahide groups, and they get together once a week, and they study the Parsha, which is the Torah portion of the week. So as I mentioned, this week we studied about Noah. And so they actually have books in English, and they discuss and they're former evangelical Christians, some of them. And they've decided to adopt the 7 laws of Noah, so they still accept the supremacy of God. They still accept the holiness of the Bible, but it's in a different way, obviously. They accept upon themselves the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they're considered Noahides, and they call themselves Noahides. I know one of them, for example, he mentioned this on the talk. He said there was a point where he and his wife, they were so into it, they wanted to convert to Judaism. And I was just amazed when I heard this, and it shows you his level of faith and belief. He said we were ready to sell our home because they lived somewhere, I don't know, in Georgia or someplace, and they were going to move near in order to be part of the Jewish community, you'd have to live near a synagogue so you can walk there on Sabbath. You're not going to drive, right? So that's part of it. He said we put our house up for sale. We almost sold it, and then the deal fell through, and then there was this complicated, and we saw that it wasn't going smoothly, and we took that as a sign that God was saying, I don't want you to convert right now. Maybe leave it for another time. And so they took that as a sign that they should stay as Noahides. They would still continue in that path, be connected to God, but not necessarily as a Jew. And this is the thing that Judaism is unique over all other faiths, and that is you don't have to be a Jew to have a share in the world to come. If you do accept upon yourself the 7 laws, everyone has a place in the next world, and as long as we follow those 7 laws to the best of our ability, then we have a place in the next world. Now, we don't focus on it so much.
Yeah.
In Judaism, we don't focus on what's going to be after. We would rather focus on how do we make life here the best that it can be, and connected to God, because the idea is God is hidden, and we want to reveal him on this earth by doing things that are spiritual and ritual and connected, and we try to bring God down to this earth. That's one of the
Yeah, my friend Nugloff, he's in the live chat, like I said, and he said he had a question for you. I'm sorry?
Say hi.
Yeah.
What's
hello.
his name?
I don't know his name, but his YouTube name is Nugloff. I don't know what that means.
Well,
it's just a name. But he has a question for you about the concept of faith, the Jewish concept of faith, and how that contrasts with the Christian, because he's Christian, I'm Christian, how that contrasts with the Christian definition. We have this definition of, the evidence of things that are unseen, So it's like we have faith is the evidence of things unseen, and the reward of faith is to see what we believe. So we don't yet see it, but we believe it, and the reward for that is we get to actually see what we took a leap of faith to believe. Does that mesh with the Jewish definition of faith?
So what's very interesting is is that if you look at the primary prayer that every Jew is enjoined to recite every day, twice a day actually, is God doesn't. The Bible very rarely talks about the next world. If you do this and this, then in the afterlife you will see or you will enjoy something. It is there, it is hinted at, but it is not mentioned clearly. However, what the Torah does mention is, and if you follow these precepts, then I will give your harvest in its time, and the rain will fall. And so you see a very interesting thing is where if we follow the rules, we will see the results on this earth. We won't have to wait to see to see the reward, to see the positive. And that's very interesting. So it's I think there's a term for it in English. I think it's called it's non-verifiable. I'm not sure of the exact term, but the idea is God is not promising something in the far away where there's really no one who can come back from the dead and say, yeah, I got my reward. We have really no way of proving it. But we see there's many prophecies that actually have shown, like when, for example, we know that the land of Israel, when the Jewish people were not there, it became a desolate land, and that's actually in the prophecy. And when the Jews returned, it's become alive again. Unfortunately, I mean, maybe we shouldn't get into that so much, but a lot of mistakes were made, and it's causing a lot of problems today. But certainly we've seen the land flourish. We've seen the land give of its bountiful harvest, etc. And that's I should really give you the source so that people can look it up. I have a chumash right here. Let's see if I can find it. But
my friend told me his name is Matt. So
Matt,
Matthew.
hi Matt.
So he's been on my podcast quite often. We're friends, but we're not on a first name basis because he's just new glove to me. But I'm hoping to have him on the podcast sometime.
Yeah, so this is Deuteronomy, I think chapter 6. It's very hard to see the text here. I'm looking in the Hebrew here, but it's Deuteronomy chapter 6, where it mentions that, and also in chapter 11. Yeah, and if you will listen to these precepts that I'm commanding you today, to love the God your God, and to serve him with all your heart and all your soul, and then I will give the harvest of your fields in the right time, and your grain and your vine, your grapes, and you will be able to gather all your harvest, etc. So, and I will give the fruits of the field will all be fruitful, and to provide for your flocks, and you will eat and you will be satisfied. And then there's the warning, don't turn your heart away, because then God will be angry, and then the land will not yield its fruit as it would be. So there's like very clear, very clear. I don't want to say you could say cause and effect. That the Torah is.
Yeah.
So, but there is certainly a lot of faith if things that we don't see. There certainly is a lot of faith and trust that is necessary. Certainly, because sometimes things can look very, very dark, So I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, what comes to mind when you talk about your Jewish approach to rewards, it's very earthly, worldly rewards, but there's a spiritual dimension to it because God is orderly. His creation is orderly. He created a good world. He didn't create a world full of death and disease and thorns and thistles. He created a good world, and we messed it up.
An enjoyable world.
Huh?
He made the apples red and the
Yeah,
bananas yellow and the
yeah,
oranges is orange, and
yeah.
everything colorful and tasting wonderful, and for us to enjoy. He wants us to enjoy our life on this earth, and at the same time to remember where what the source is. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so when Satan, I don't know if you believe in Satan as a spiritual being, as an angel that fell, I suppose you do, but we do, and he wants to mess with everything and introduce corruption, corruption
Yeah,
in governments, corruption in a businessman, corruption in a relationship, and a husband and wife, corruption everywhere, so that things that are running smoothly according to God's will just get out of whack, and then it's more damage, more
right,
chaos for Satan because he hates God and he hates God's
right,
creatures.
right. I am familiar with that concept. We do have like the angel of death. There is the concept of Satan in Judaism, but he doesn't work. He's not separate from God and fighting against God in our view. It rather he's doing God's will, which in other words, God is saying, I want you to test
Yeah,
mankind, and
yeah,
hopefully mankind will choose to do the right thing and not be seduced by you. The example that's given is a king who hires a prostitute to try to seduce the prince.
mm,
And he pays her. He says, I want you to try to seduce him. But of course, the king wants his son to overcome and
mm,
not fall to her graces.
mm.
And she's trying her best to seduce him, but she herself also is in the back of her mind is hoping, I hope he doesn't fall for this, so that he can come out strong in the end. So that's the way we look at it. So he's there's nothing outside of God, because that's part of the whole, like there is no place devoid of God,
Yeah,
if you will,
yeah,
because that would put a limit to God's, dominance or presence in the world. And that's how we look at it. Yeah.
yeah. I agree. I agree that Satan is doing God's work 100%. That's part of his punishment. He's frustrated because he hates God. He hates God's plan. That's a Christian perspective. Satan
Right.
opposes God and he hates God's plan, but he can't help but glorify God and to make God's plans come to fruition because God is sovereign and God only gives the permission to Satan so that
Right.
God can accomplish something good out of it. But there are people, there are human beings with ill will, make no doubt about it.
Oh,
So
for
there
sure.
must be a possibility that your conception of Satan is flawed because perhaps Satan has ill will too. If your neighbor who you have met, he has ill will, then how can you doubt that it's possible that Satan has ill will too? And that's what we believe. We believe that ill will is a real problem. It's a problem in me. I've got to fight against my own tendency to ill will, to hate someone or to want to mistreat an animal or to not respect the environment or whatever. Right?
Right. So I might respond to that by saying, everything receives its nourishment. All life, all creation receives its nourishment from God. So therefore, so if that's the case, then if you have some evil forces, how can they be alive if they are against God and they're not doing his will? And so they do receive nourishment, but through the backside, through the they don't receive it um, directly. It's like if let's say your son would come to you and you want to give him bread, so you give him bread straightforward, but then there's somebody who you dislike, but you sort of have to give them their bread, so you throw it over your shoulder, sort of, like it's not in the natural positive way, but rather kind of forced to give him nourishment, but because he's from the forces of negative. So that's kind of a bit of the mystical ideas. But everything receives its nourishment from God. So there's nothing that is detached or can fight against God, because if so, then God's power is diminished. So, but anyway,
Yeah,
but
can I
that,
respond to that? Can I respond to that
sure,
quickly? It's like if let's say there's a father and son, like you said, but the father is rich and he wants to give his son a good inheritance, and the son is selfish and just takes all the money, steals the money from his father, and then
hmm
raises an army against his father, and he buys himself a chainsaw and he climbs a tree and he's sitting on a branch, a sturdy branch in this tree, and he starts sawing off the branch using the chainsaw that he bought with the stolen money from his father, and then he's going to fall to his death. I mean, he abused the gifts of his
Right.
father. He fought against his father, even though everything good he had come from the father, and he's sawing off the very branch that he's sitting on, and it's at his own peril. It's his own doom. He's the author of his own destruction. God only does good. He's a source only of good. He sustains everyone. He sends rain on the good and on the evil, and it's up to us to use or abuse our free will. But when
Right.
if God forbid we end up in hell, we're falling away from God. We're falling away from life, from justice, from truth, from beauty, from everything that's good. And Satan, that's his punishment. He doesn't have life. He doesn't have love. I mean, he has eternal falling away from God.
Right.
That's his punishment. So that's how we see it. I just want you to understand the Christian perspective,
Yeah,
because
no, that's
evil has no substance. Evil is a parasite on the good, and evil is a falling away from the good.
okay.
That's just
Right.
the Christian perspective.
Fair enough.
Just so it's clear where I stand. Now, how old is the universe? Because I'm a young Earth creation. I believe that the whole universe is about 7,000 plus or minus years old. As a Jew, is that traditional to see a young, compared to the atheists who say millions, billions of years,
Right.
do you hold to a younger number?
So, so yeah, we do hold to that tradition of the Earth being 5,784
Okay.
years,
Okay.
we just commemorated the creation just about a month ago,
Okay.
a month or so ago. Yeah, it seems like an eternity now with what's happened in the last 2 weeks,
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately. But we can also say let's say you or I were to show up in the Garden of Eden a few days after creation, and we chop down a tree, you'd still see the rings in the tree, which would
Right.
imply that
Right.
it's
Right.
much older. And so it's hard to, the evidence might show a longer age, a greater age to the universe. It's certainly a belief. I can't prove one way or the other. But that's one of those things where we don't we take it on faith that is the
Okay.
tradition. That's how old the Earth is, and
Okay. So
yeah,
it would be quite shocking and unusual, you would say, for like a pious, devout Jew to believe in Darwinian evolution. We evolved from apes and all these sorts of things, or is it not that uncommon?
um, the, there's it's hard, it's interesting how you phrase that. There are Jews who are observant who may take a different approach to the age of the Earth. It's really open to interpretation
Okay. Okay.
for many people.
Okay.
I remember we had a visiting scientist once who wrote a book about the age of creation, and he's observant himself, and at the same time, he may have some explanations. We could spend time on that. It's neither here nor there. How relevant is it really so much to what we're doing today?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
what's
yeah,
going
yeah,
on
yeah, yeah. I'm
today?
just curious. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Yeah, it's not something I lose sleep over. I'll tell you.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't either, frankly, I don't. But I do find it interesting, and I do find that there is a danger to the teaching that you and I are just animals, and we can
Right.
point to the animals. Well, look, the animals do it, and we're just animals, so like it must be okay, right? They do that with the gay sex thing, by the way. I hope you know that. They do that. They
Well,
do point to
animals.
the apes, and they say, well, the apes are doing it, so we should be able to do it too. It's just
Right,
evolution.
right. I mean, animals tear each other apart without any
Remorse.
mercy, and certainly, they wouldn't do it for cruelty. They do it to eat, but that's not what we are, not who we are. We should be above that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
have you heard of Dr. Viktor Frankl? Man's
Uh,
Search for Meaning?
yeah, it sounds familiar. Yeah.
So he wrote about one of the famous things that he pointed out. He was an educated therapist who ended up in one of the concentration camps, and one of his ways to cope, he decided that he was going to use it as an experiment, his whole experience as an experiment to observe how people behave when they've been stripped of everything, and
Mhm.
and watch how people behave. Some of us can say, there was the Freudian school of thought, which
Mm,
said man is essentially wicked and
mm,
is just holding back his impulses because out of society. And Frankl had a different idea, and he felt that man has a soul within him, and there's the good there, and it just needs to come out. And it's kind of almost the direct opposite of what Freud thought. And he is actually in the later years, more recent years, become more of an accepted authority, whereas Freud has been kind of discarded. But one of the things he points out is that there were people, he saw people doing either of two things. He would see someone, and they were literally worked to the bone and given barely anything to eat, and they were starved, many of the inmates in the camps. And he would see somebody seeing someone else suffering, and they would share the little bread that they had, even to a stranger, and showing the goodness that's possible in mankind. And sometimes he would see a father take the food out of his son's hand and didn't care, and showed the cruelty that's possible. So he observed this, and he came up with a number of theories, and that's become very it's discussed in this book, Man's Search for Meaning. So that's very fascinating.
Yeah.
If you want to look at when man is really literally down to the bare bones, and how can he still retain his humanity when, obviously the Nazis tried to reduce them to people to a numbers, barely managing to survive. So hopefully we're a bit above that, and I think it's important to have good values based on a tradition of godly values that are based on. I mean, we do believe, both you and I, that the Bible is divinely
Inspired,
given and ordained and taught, and there's definitely a place for it today. Certainly, it's never been more needed, but it's always been needed, but certainly today as well.
Yeah, I want to end on a positive note, but before doing that, I want to talk about something a little bit more controversial, if you don't mind, which is, my intuition tells me that, the Hasidic Jews here in Montreal are correct when they criticize Zionism and the state of Israel. I sympathize with their perspective, where God has put the Jews into exile, and we shouldn't force God's hand and play God and artificially create the state of Israel and all the chaos that we've seen there, and the treatment of the people there. I don't agree with it. So I'm against the state of Israel and against Zionism, and a lot of the Jews here in Montreal are. A lot of other Jews aren't. They're pro-Zionist, pro-Israel. I don't want to hurt your feelings if you disagree with me, but I'm just being honest with you. And I'm not a Jew, so I'm not a Muslim, so I don't have a horse in the race. But that's my default position. I just want you to reflect on that and maybe correct me if I'm
Sure.
wrong or whatever.
There's a very small minority of Hasidic Jews who believe that the Zionist state is illegitimate and shouldn't be there, etc. The vast majority of Hasidic Jews, as observant Jews, believe it is the Holy Land. It is our people. Many of us disagree with many of the policies of the state. The state of Israel and its government, while it is run by Jews, does not follow the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
If it did, we would see a lot less cruelty there. And here's the thing that I would say to you. Let me ask you this: do you condemn what Hamas did on the 7th of October?
Of course. Okay.
Because I didn't hear that from you. Like I just heard.
I don't think I need to state the obvious. I don't need to state the obvious. I'm against terrorism, against cruelty. I was agreeing with everything you said about kindness and respect for human life and animal life.
So Israel is in an impossible situation. How are they going to stop the attacks? And the rocket attacks have been ongoing on a regular basis since they vacated Gaza. So that's a big problem. And there's many suffering people there. So how do we put an end to it and stop the suffering altogether?
Well, my thesis is that there's a spiritual battle on planet Earth.
Absolutely.
Satan is the prince of this world, according to my Christian religion. Satan is the prince of this world. Those who have power, political power and whatnot, yes, true authority comes from God, yes. But power breeds corruption. Power, the more power you have, the more consequences there are to the temptations that you fall prey to, the evil temptations for corruption. And we can see it everywhere. It's not just Jews versus Muslims, it's everywhere. Okay, so my thesis is that there are competing mafias, and some people want to point the finger at the Jews. The Jews run everything. The Jews control the money. The Jews control the media. The Jews control this, and the Jews control that. My response to that is, don't be silly. Like, I mean, who cares if it's Jews or Muslims or Chinese or whoever's? It doesn't matter. What matters is good versus evil, right? Are you humbly serving your God according to your monotheistic religion, or are you abusing your free will and enslaving people, torturing people, killing people, being unfair and unjust, and that it's a battle of good versus evil. I'm not against the Jews. I'm not for the Muslims. I'm Christian, so I want the Jews and the Muslims to be Christian, obviously, but I'm not going to force that. I'm not going to preach to people to convert, right? But I think that Jesus Christ is the answer and the solution, and that those who are in power and that are abusing their power, it's not just the Jews, it's not just the Muslims, it's everyone in power. I think that power corrupts. That's the problem. That's the way I see it. So I'm for the little guy. I'm for the little people suffering. When it comes to Ukraine, Russia, it's like, people pick sides, but I want peace. I want people to stop suffering. And who suffers? It's not the elites. It's the little guys, right? And it's the same thing in your Middle East there.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I don't think we have another hour to go.
Yeah. And the other thing is, a lot of people are bashing Islam and the Muslims or whatever.
Who's bashing Islam? Who's bashing Islam? I'm
Well,
sorry.
all of my conservative Christian friends.
Oh, that's what you're hearing?
Yeah.
I mean,
There's a lot of that.
I think the simple issue is, does Israel have the right to live peacefully where it is, surrounded by 22 states who want to see it gone? I think there's no easy answers. I do hope that the government of the state, it's very interesting because we have a saying in Judaism that, and we vote and we try to vote right, we vote left, whatever. We got Biden, Trump, this and that, Trudeau versus Polyev, I guess. And we assume that if we vote this way or that way, things will change, right? No. But there's a saying in Judaism that, and I'm not sure if it's in the prophets, it might be in the prophets, I have to look it up. The heart of kings is in God's hands. In other words, regardless of who the leader of a country is, ultimately God directs them in their decisions because he's ultimately the one in control. And so even if you have a right wing or a left, ultimately their decisions will be based through what God wants.
Yeah.
We see the decisions of politicians have massive ramifications. I can only hope that the world leaders today, all of them, including Israel, including all the others, make the right decisions so that there's the least amount of suffering, and we can have some real peace, like not a fantasy of peace, but some real peace. I think one of the big mistakes that have been done, and I'll just say this if you want to get into that, but one of the biggest mistakes that was done was disrespecting the Arabs. I'll tell you what I mean by that. When the Hamas charter, when the PLO charter says from the river to the sea, that's ours, and then we ignore that, don't respect their words, and we say, no, they want two states. And we pretend that's what they want when they've said clearly that's not what they want. So we have to respect what our, I want to say enemy, adversary, partner, neighbor, etc., whoever it is, we have to respect what they say and work with reality, not work with fantasy. And I think that's very important. I'll just end with this. The Torah is not a book of belief and faith alone. It's also rational understanding. We are supposed to use our brains, use our mind. And I said this to you earlier. When God said to Cain, "Why did you kill your brother?" We are supposed to use our power of deduction to say, that means if God was saying, Cain, you did something wrong, that means he knew what he did was wrong and that there was a law against murder. You can't blame somebody if there isn't a law saying this is wrong. So therefore there was so everything we do uses logic and rationality and reason. We're not, and one of the fundamental holidays in Judaism is Passover, where everything is questioning. We encourage the children to question. We want to understand. We use our minds. It's not like the Jews have any special powers or whatever, however you may believe. We are taught to question everything. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it goes too far. But hopefully we use our minds, and at the same time we also understand with faith that the world is not a WYSIWYG. You know, it's not what you see. Is there's a deep power behind everything. I pray for peace in the world. I'm sure you do too, David. And I hope that all innocents can come out of this unscathed. I hope that peace can be achieved, and the leaders do the right thing and make the right decisions.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I'm praying for peace. I'm fasting for peace too. That's what our Pope has called us to do this past Tuesday, next Friday, and I'm sure there'll be more fasting
I've
for
heard that
peace.
they called for a fast last week in Israel too.
Yeah, it's worldwide. It's worldwide. All Christians are supposed to be offering freely. Of course, there's no compulsion, but that's the suggestion. That's the request that's made by the Catholic and by the Orthodox, and a lot of people are concerned. I mean, everyone's concerned. Everyone's concerned. Everyone's concerned. We all want peace, and we don't want hatred, and we don't want corrupt politics. It's so frustrating, but like you mentioned, it's in God's hands. All authentic authority comes from God, and we think about King Cyrus, and we think there's nothing impossible for God. So we have to have faith and hope, and we have to accept. Also, we have to accept the consequences, the karma, the bad choices we made. Sometimes they come back and they bite us in the butt.
There's no question that even in Israel, like the people are very angry at their leaders for failing them in many ways. So yeah, let's hope that there's some common sense that prevails and good judgment and good decisions, and hopefully God will guide the ways of all the leaders to do the right thing, and we can prevent God forbid World War III. We don't want to be going there, because it's really scary what's happening now.
I always emphasize the corruption of the elites and the politicians, but I should just say that I'm sure there are people with good intentions. There are people who are taking on a burden which is not easy, and it's not like if you're in a position of power, it's not like it's easy to find the good solution. I don't believe that. And even if you're a man of prayer or a woman of prayer in a high position in a complex geopolitical tense situation, I don't think it's easy. So we have to pray for our leaders, and we do pray for our leaders. But the fact remains that there are people with ill will that hate their fellow man because of religion, because of skin color, whatever.
Or they have intentions that are not for the benefit of mankind, or humankind, but rather to retain or to keep their power, and then control them. Like, I mean, I don't know if you're thinking of the globalists and the WEF and all that stuff. I'm keeping an eye on that, and that concerns me a lot.
Yeah.
There you have a group of elites, as you say, and they have their designs for the rest of the world, whether we voted for it or not. They're not interested in our choice, and they want to have us eating insects and I don't know what.
My litmus test for a politician or whatever is, are they pro-abortion, pro-pornography, pro-LGBTQ, and all the satanic evils? Are they pushing all of that? Then probably they're out of touch with the one true God, right? I mean, that's just, I'm not trying to judge their heart, but if you're pushing all of this evil and you think you think that vice is virtue, I'm sorry, but you don't have my vote, and you don't have my confidence, and you need to repent, and you need to get right with God.
I think one of the big problems today, if you want to mention politics, is just is how it seems like they get into power and then they just go on their merry way. And when did we ever vote for this, that, or the other? And they're just Trudeau policies that we never asked for, and it's all affecting us. We try to make our living and put some gas in our car, and then and look at the inflation, and everyone's suffering, and So I'm totally with you there. We're on the same page.
Did you get the whatever? Did you get it? Did you get it?
I had a lot of I had a lot of conflict with that. Very concerned. I certainly wouldn't allow anyone near me after
Okay.
this to put a stab in me there.
Okay.
I had to. I was out of work for about a year and a half, and so I unfortunately. I have a friend who didn't, and he says, well, maybe you got the what do you call it, the
Placebo.
placebo, exactly. So I didn't suffer ill effects, I hope.
God willing. God
But
willing. Yeah. God willing.
there's something very devilish going on there,
Yeah.
with the whole
Yeah.
Pfizer, the whole business. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, it's
that's part of the whole thing. That's part of this whole scam. Yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah, the main thing is, the compliance. I don't think that what they had injected, I don't think it was that effective, to begin with,
Oh
like
no,
in a good
it's
way,
totally didn't
or in a
work.
bad way. I think a lot of it was
Right.
placebo,
But
because
I see the control. I see people coming to synagogue. Some of them were still wearing masks, and I'm saying, like, what is going on? Like, come on,
no.
stop letting the fear rule your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
So
we understand, and I'm certainly with you there. And gosh, let's hope for our children's sake that the world improves down the road.
yeah. Well, listen, it's a pleasure to meet you. You're a very gentle man, a thoughtful man, a kind and considerate man.
Thank you,
And
David.
I thank you for reaching out to me, but I hope you come back. Like, I hope you come back sometime and talk to me. I got a lot of questions for you about Judaism, the Torah, the Bible stories, and there's so much to explore. And, the politics, I don't like talking about it, but it just kind of came out because I wanted to get your
Yeah.
perspective on stuff. Sometimes you can't help but bring politics into stuff, but it kind of
Well, the
pollutes
last 2 weeks
things,
have been quite intense, right? So
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
I'd like to get away from it if we could,
If we
but
can, yeah. But so I hope you come back, and it's been a pleasure meeting you, and I'll be praying for you and yours. I hope you'll pray for me and mine, okay?
absolutely, David. Thank you.
Thank you so
Just
much.
one last question. Do you have a
Of course.
family and kids?
I don't have any children, unfortunately. I'm married 28 years, no children, and now it's kind of too late. She's 50, in her mid 50s, and I'm 53, so it's kind of that ship has sailed. But we love each other. It would be nice to have some children. You have one son. Do you have more than that?
Um, so we have 4 boys.
Okay.
They're older now. They've all moved out. But yeah, I mean, but I think your work. I would say that your um, uh, preaching against abortion is a great merit. What you're doing, and we all have to do that. And every child is sacred, right? So when you do that, you're kind of adopting children,
Ah,
keeping them alive, God
yeah.
willing. So
Yeah.
so
Well, there's a prayer.
that's good work, holy work too.
Thank you. There's a prayer that I pray every day, and it's one of those prayers where I don't want to miss it. Some days I can miss certain prayers, but that's one prayer I don't want to miss is the prayer of spiritual adoption of the child that was signed up
Hmm.
for an abortion, like the
Oh
parents
yeah,
registered this child for
yeah.
abortion, and there's a prayer I pray every day for 9 months, and I'm supposed to
Oh,
allegedly get a spiritual adoption of this
I like that.
child.
I like that idea.
Possibly, it's not guaranteed. I don't know, but it's a nice thought. And
Yeah,
so I do that 9 months in a row, and then I keep going another 9 months. And so I've probably got like 7 or 8 of these spiritual children now accumulated.
that's fascinating. I love that. I love that. I have
Yeah.
one last question for you, David.
Yes.
CVS, what does that mean?
Catholic versus is VS, is shortened to VS, like
Right.
versus this versus that. So Catholic versus, because
Ah,
I compare and contrast my worldview with the Jewish, Muslim, Protestant, Orthodox,
right.
Hindu. I've had all kinds of
I
people on
thought
my
maybe it
show.
was Catholic versus secular.
Nah.
That could be, but
No,
I get
but
it now. Okay, fair enough.
when I speak to my American guests, they're always making fun of me because CVS is a pharmacy.
It's a pharmacy chain, right?
Yeah. So it was maybe a poor choice of name, but I didn't know any better, and it's kind of funny.
Right.
So thank you so
All right.
much. Great to
Have a
meet you.
wonderful week.
And please do stay in touch, and maybe in the new year, because I'm booked until the new year, but in early 2024, if you're not too busy or if you're not traveling or whatever, I know you got a lot going on, just reach out and I'd love to talk to you again, okay?
Sounds great, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you for taking the
Have a
time. God
wonderful
bless
week.
you.
All the
Bye-bye.
best. You too.
Bye-bye.
God bless you too. Bye-bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.